Good afternoon. I'm Barry Castleman, and I'm going to talk about the situation in the United States. First of all, because we did have favorable elections last November, Senator Murray's bill, the Ban Asbestos in America Act, is going to probably get a vote in the U.S. Congress this year. The first hearings were held at the beginning of this month. The bill was reintroduced. The bill would ban all use of new asbestos products. It would halt the import of asbestos brake parts. We're importing about $100 million worth of brake parts from countries that use a lot of asbestos. Those countries primarily are China, Brazil, Colombia, and Mexico, also Canada. But I don't believe the stuff from Canada contains asbestos. I still haven't been able to find out if there are any asbestos brake manufacturing plants in Canada. The bill would also halt the importation of asbestos cement sheet from Mexico. We import 60,000 metric tons a year of asbestos cement panels from Mexico. This is not really something that can be handled safely, as the World Trade Organization determined in its case several years ago. And certainly this is something we could easily do without in the United States. The bill would allow industry to ask the Environmental Protection Agency for exemptions, so that if the people who are making the little amount of asbestos products in this country with asbestos, roofing products, want to insist that they have to have asbestos for these products, they can go to the EPA and they'd have the opportunity to ask for an exemption under this bill. The bill would also cover contaminant asbestos, so that if you have talc that's contaminated with asbestos and you're using it to make consumer products, those products would still be banned under the legislation. And because of the fact that it does cover contaminant asbestos, the ban is running into stiff opposition from the crushed stone industry, which is very much afraid that the Environmental Protection Agency might actually be dispatched to do its job and go around the country and look at all of the geologic hotspots in the country, like El Dorado County, California, and identify the environmental and consumer mortal risks associated with the exploitation of these minerals and stones. I want to talk a little bit about the fight that we've been having with the brake defendants. By way of disclosure, I testify as an expert witness in asbestos litigation. I wrote my doctoral thesis about the public health and corporate history of asbestos, and so I do adult education for groups of 12 and around the country from time to time about the history of toxic corporate crime. And so I just want to talk about the latest variation on that, and that is up until the turn of this century, it was accepted that doing brake work with asbestos-containing brakes could kill you. There was an alert bulletin issued by the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health in 1975. The Environmental Protection Agency put out a guidance document about brake mechanic asbestos hazards in 1986 called the Gold Book, and distributed it to all of the vocational and technical schools in the country to try and get the word out, not just posting it on a website somewhere or hoping somebody's going to find it. Even the Friction Materials Standards Institute published a booklet accepting the fact that asbestos caused these diseases, cancer and asbestosis in brake mechanics, if they didn't take precautions to protect themselves from the dust. And so suddenly the brake defendants in the asbestos litigation today are facing increased attention, increased liability, and so in order to get out from under this, they have concocted a very brazen assault on the science. And one thing they did was they went to the EPA and they said that the EPA should withdraw the Gold Book. In 2003, 17 years after the Gold Book was published, in the middle of August, hoping nobody would notice, lawyers for parties they would not disclose filed a 10-page document with the EPA asking that the EPA withdraw the Gold Book. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. The other thing that was going on is that the Occupational Safety and Health Administration was publishing a fact sheet on the 1994 asbestos standard that OSHA issued, which had a mandatory appendix for brake mechanics about the methods they're supposed to use to reduce dust exposure. And This was started back in the year 2000 and was running into delays by the year 2004 when John Henshaw was the head of OSHA. Henshaw has since gone on to leave OSHA at the end of 2004 and become a defense expert witness for brake defendants, including Bendix in asbestos litigation. So he's still making his contribution to society in that way. He was prevailed upon in a deposition last December to ask why he called up his former associates at OSHA to try and get them to pull down the brake guidance safety and health intelligence, safety and health information bulletin, the fact sheet. And he said it was poorly written. Henshaw then admitted that he had never published any peer-reviewed scientific papers on asbestos or anything else. He never published a peer-reviewed scientific paper, but he still was able to tell that this was poorly written because he had been reading peer-reviewed scientific papers for 25 years working at Monsanto before he became the head of OSHA for Bush's first term. He also said that he was not paid by anybody to call his former subordinates at OSHA and threaten a data quality challenge against the fact sheet if they didn't pull it from the website. He did this as a gesture of public health, or, you know, out of the goodness of his heart. He said that he didn't remember to mention that he had a role as a defense expert witness for Honeywell when he called up his former subordinates at OSHA to tell him to pull the fact sheet. He has been a teaming partner at an outfit called ChemRisk. I'll talk more about them in a minute. Since early 2005. Soon after leaving OSHA, within months, he was listed as a teaming partner with this consulting firm that does a lot of business consulting. And he says that he did not know his daughter did asbestos litigation defense work at ChemRisk while he was the OSHA chief in 2004. There are 21 bills from ChemRisk with line entries for billing for his daughter's work. She got her PhD at Johns Hopkins in 2004 and promptly went to work for ChemRisk while he was still the head of OSHA. And he says he never talked to her about the fact that she was doing asbestos litigation defense work at the time. Didn't know it at the time he was deposed on that 3 months ago. Didn't know it until somebody confronted him with a copy of the bill, and then he said, well, maybe so. The fact sheet author, the guy who was the author of this OSHA fact sheet, was threatened with dismissal after John Henshaw made his phone calls and his email to his former subordinates at OSHA demanding that the fact sheet be withdrawn. And after some anger from Capitol Hill, because there was an election after he was threatened with dismissal the day before the election. And so it took another month for them to apologize to him for threatening him with dismissal and say they were going to drop all charges. I mean, this guy had been at OSHA for 31 years. He'd never been in trouble. He was a certified industrial hygienist. He wasn't a troublemaker. He was just a guy doing his job. Now, the new publications on asbestos that claimed that asbestos doesn't endanger brake mechanics were solicited by lawyers in the year 2001, have so far cost over $31 million, jointly billed to General Motors, Ford, and Daimler Chrysler. The scientists who published these articles have testified that they were approached by lawyers to write the articles. The bills from these consulting firms, Exponent and ChemRisk and the various scientists who published these articles contain line items showing that they were billing for things like prepare meta-analysis, and then another $19,000 or so present meta-analysis at scientific conferences. So here they were actually being solicited to write these articles, then, and the articles are billed for asbestos litigation defense. That's the headline on all these bills. And then the line items are they're being paid to write the medical literature and to get out there and push it at scientific conferences. So this is not the way science is usually done, but that's the way they did this. Basically what they did were reanalyses of older epidemiology studies that were never intended to look at brake mechanic risks per se. For a variety of technical reasons, a meta-analysis where you do a grouping of weak studies only makes it more likely that you're not going to find any effect. And one of the line items, technical support asbestos litigation billed by Exponent, was called Prepare Materials to Challenge 1986 EPA. So we're back to the Gold Book. Basically, they were also being prepared to develop its legal challenge to the Environmental Protection Agency's 17-year-old Gold Book in 2003 because the defendants in the asbestos litigation wanted to wave that around as Exhibit A and say the EPA no longer considers this a hazard, they've withdrawn this publication, and we want all these cases against us dismissed by you, Judge. And they would go around the country with that. The Data Quality Act, on the basis of the Gold Book Challenge, was on the basis of something called the Data Quality Act, which is an interesting thing in itself. What actually happened was, back in 2001, some lobbyists slipped in a 2-sentence rider on an appropriations bill that was 400 pages long in the middle of the night, and this rider said that all government information should be of the highest quality. Anybody's got a problem with anything that the government puts out can go to the Office of Management and Budget and complain about it, and the government will issue a notice of clarification if they find that there was some error in what the public information was. It's turned out to be, that was a, that basically created open season on all kinds of government information relating to public health. On the Data Quality Act, the government's been told not to tell people that high salt content is bad for people with high blood pressure, that the science on that hasn't been so good. They've been told not to tell people that certain pesticides are endocrine disruptors because the government hasn't defined what exactly it means by the term endocrine disruptor. The lawyers are very creative in coming up with these data quality challenges, and so in this particular case, 2 years later, a data quality challenge was launched by a law firm that is listed as number 6 in the list of who represents corporate America. They're very proud of that. It's right on their website. A firm called Morgan Lewis, which is based right here in Philadelphia. This is where their headquarters is. They actually have 18 offices all over the world. And the only thing they neglected to say in this letter to the EPA was who they were paid to send that letter by. And so members of Congress offices and media called them up, and they never disclosed where who paid their $700 an hour fees to ask the EPA to stash the Gold Book. We were able to get this fought back. People inside the EPA called up, told me about this. We got letters in from scientists saying, look, this is a serious problem. You shouldn't withdraw this warning to brake mechanics. In fact, you should renew it and update it, and that's what they've decided to do after going back and forth about this for several years. In the course of this, there were at least 3 meetings with the Office of Management and Budget in the White House trying to direct OSHA and EPA about this whole business of what are they going to tell brake mechanics. And so people in Congress are now holding hearings and they're asking questions about this. There's a General Accounting Office investigation that's going on. Still the OSHA and EPA are stonewalling the congressional investigators up to this time. Very briefly, the U.S. sale, there is apparently U.S. sale of asbestos still going on. A Dodge Ram brake bought in the middle of last year had asbestos. It was found that way by laboratory analysis. GM and Ford told OSHA after OSHA called them up after getting this threat from Henshaw about the data quality challenge that they were still using brakes in some Pontiacs and some Ford SUVs in new models. Of course, these would never be allowed to be sold in Estonia, but they're being sold in the United States. Asbestos in brakes is banned in about 40 countries, including 27 in the European Union. And so we hoping to get the congressional orders down to EPA to get them to order the auto manufacturers to tell them the truth this time about what exactly they're selling us. With contaminant asbestos, we have a problem of contamination of talc, vermiculite, and stone. You've heard something about that. With other scientists, I sent a letter to the Consumer Product Safety Commission asking them to halt the sale of a product called Durham's Water Putty, which is asbestos-containing dry consumer patching compound that's sold coast to coast in Ace Hardware stores. And we're being confronted by a lot of opposition to the asbestos ban bill by interests like these talc companies that want to keep on selling asbestos. And vermiculite, there's a company called Virginia Vermiculite that also sells a material that's not as bad as the Libby vermiculite, but it's contaminated with asbestos too. And so we have a lot of work to do with the contaminant asbestos as well as with asbestos used in commercial products. I just want to read you one internal document. It's just a little bit from Johns Manville. Back in 1975, Johns Manville had a mine that mined asbestos-containing talc, and they were putting warning labels, OSHA warnings on their talc. But this other company, Vanderbilt Talc in New York State, was assuring everybody their talcs didn't have asbestos in it, even after Selikoff and others had told them that it did. And the people at Johns Manville in the laboratories are looking at the Vanderbilt talc, and they're finding actinolite, tremolite, and chrysotile asbestos in it. And this is the guy from Johns Manville writing an internal message to other people at Johns Manville. This wasn't written for public consumption. He says, the RT Vanderbilt position, their position with respect to labeling must be deliberately perfidious. They cannot be this misinformed. Slim Thompson, their technical director, has a PhD in mineralogy. At the moment, Vanderbilt is misleading their customers and confusing ours with their decision not to label. Ultimately, the truth will out, and they will be forced to label. Well, that was 32 years ago, and they're still not labeling that stuff. So we're going to see if we can do something about that. Thank you very much.